Big news, baby. Senate committee passes Weiner's bipartisan bill to allow regulated use of psychedelics in the state of California.
Yes, sir. So the bill passes 7-4, and no, we've talked about doing this before, which is hopping on. I'm surprised at the lack of coverage, maybe, or the lack of knowledge. This was done 2 days ago. Haven't seen too much reporting on it. But to your point, Senate Bill 1012 will allow adults 21 and older to use certain psychedelic substances in a regulated context and under the supervision of a licensed and trained facilitator. So people might be asking what that means. Oregon is the first state that's open for business right now using psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms. A regulated a regulated industry, so to speak, or a regulated framework for adults means that you have licensed service centers, you have licensed facilitators that are trained by over 140 hours under a supervised program on how to hold space for an individual going through a ceremony. And you also have licensed manufacturers of the mushrooms, so you know how it's grown to a very specific specification, the genetics, et cetera, and what these genetics do. I guess a phase 2 conversation is different mushroom genetics do different things, and some are better for different indications, if you will. Although I'm sure California will pass a similar language as to we're not treating people as patients, we're treating them as clients. So there's no such thing as depression or anxiety or PTSD in this framework. And then you have a testing facility. So you grow the mushroom and it gets tested before it gets shipped to the service center to be delivered by the facilitator. So there are now on top of Oregon, Colorado. So Measure 109 passed, Prop 122 passed. That's the board is now just creating the minutes or the actual language and the framework that service centers and everybody else within this regulated framework will have to follow. And now California, well, it goes now to the Senate Public Safety Committee, but
Yeah.
it did pass 7-4. Three huge states, man. And I just want everybody to know there's 20 other states that are moving some sort of active legislation through a very similar framework to create these adult therapeutic use frameworks. Cash pay, pretty amazing.
So, a couple things I want to unpack with you. Number
Sure.
one, California being the most populated state in the country. Dude, why don't you think that this was made? I mean, 12 months ago, if this was announced, dude, this would be in the New York Times, the Washington Post. Like, it's shocking. Why don't you think this got the media exposure that the rest of these states got, dude? Oregon was huge.
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 I think Oregon was almost a pipe dream, right? And I've spoken to Tom about this before, Eckhart, who him and his wife, his late wife, who passed away from cancer, when they introduced it, it was them setting up these booths and going to different parts of the cities and just advocating. And he told me straight up that he never ever thought that it would actually get passed. Um, and this is the third crack that California has had at introducing something. So Senator Weiner has tried to introduce something
Well, dude,
similar.
Newsom just struck something down. What was it, December or January?
Yeah, yeah. So he struck down the last time that they brought this forward because Newsom urged the legislation to send him a bill establishing therapeutic use guidelines. Basically,
Uh-oh.
how is the
So what this is?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, instead of decrim language. So you're seeing Measure 110 being clawed back now in Oregon, which they decriminalized everything from fentanyl to heroin to cocaine to yes to mushrooms, etc. And I think they're seeing the ramifications of that now because they're walking that back. Now, that's
The
not to
consequences of my actions, you know?
well,
Yeah.
I don't, yeah. And, I don't want all the decrim nature people to start jumping down our throats. But, when you start to, I understand what, drug policy reform and harm reduction is and all of these things. But with certain types of medicines or substances that have historical use, I think that it can work. But when you start to put these things on the street, like fentanyl and some of these, I think there was over 800 deaths last year alone in Oregon just with fentanyl overdoses.
Dude,
So
I think fentanyl is the largest killer of males 18 to 30 in the country.
it's deadly, and you don't really know what you're getting, right? So what got struck down was the decriminalization of the personal use and possession of certain psychedelic substances. And I think that, yes, I believe in people having access to their own consciousness as far as being able to take these medicines without being arrested, and a decrim legislature would allow you to do that. But I think the best thing for us to do here is to crawl before we walk, meaning introduce something that the state will actually pass. And then, as some of these cities, there's now 32, I believe, cities that are decrimmed, then start taking some of that data to show these different states, after you get something like this passed, that, hey, decrim measures having possession or not being able to sell openly, but being able to
Yeah.
possess might work. So,
And listen, I think there's a giant difference between things that are from earth, like mushrooms, cannabis, ayahuasca, like
yeah.
mescaline. Like that's a different thing than crack and fentanyl. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? I
they're
think
non-addictive unless you are addicted to seeing everything that's wrong with you on a daily basis.
yeah.
But
And
that's
listen,
why it's why these medicines work. You can get down to the root cause of your issues. And
how many people do you know have taken a high dose of anything hallucinogenic and been like, wow, I should do that same amount again tomorrow? That's just
yeah,
doesn't.
yeah, no, I mean, once to four times a year, I've seen people go in like every quarter. I
Yeah.
think I think one of the things to discuss, maybe we touch on it now, is like, this isn't a panacea, right? These medicines can help you move past years of trauma that have been governing your life within a matter of hours. It can help kickstart it, but then the job of the facilitator, of the talk therapist, and of the individual is to integrate these lessons over a longer period of time. So what doesn't get talked about often enough are the preparatory hours that go into 10 to 15 hours of preparing somebody for a ceremony. Understanding, the facilitator needs to understand what traumas are going to come up, and then integrating on the back end. So, for example, this, but MDMA for PTSD through the FDA comes with over 90 hours of talk therapy. So, this is also something that we are very interested in addressing, because just in Oregon alone, there's 297 facilitators. There's only 25 of these facilities, so there's not that much room for them to practice. But there's a little bit of a logjam when it comes to the preparatory and integration that needs to happen when you go into
So
a ceremony like this.
So there's a couple things that I want to unpack in there. But
Mm-hmm.
first, just to correct my earlier statement, it's actually not 18 to 30, it's 18 to 45 is the leading cause of death is fentanyl overdoses.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Um,
so that's leading now, that overtook, and then I believe the second is suicide amongst males. I know that,
yeah.
which
So I
is,
mean
yeah,
that's
we need some help,
insane.
man. Men need some help for sure. So,
Um, so there's a couple things I want to go back to.
mm-hmm.
Number one, on the talk therapy side, one of the things that came up in one of our conversations last week was, the LSD study that MindMed did, there was no talk therapy, and then come to find out, over 80% of the participants that were enrolled in there were actually receiving talk therapy. It just wasn't part of the clinical trial design to have it mandated in there. So I think that is a very, very, very big thing to point out to people.
Yeah, and I think this is a great time to speak about, first of all, let's just wrap this up with Cali. This bill will also create a framework for DMT, which is an active ingredient in ayahuasca. On its own, has amazing properties. MDMA and mescaline, as well as psilocybin. So now that this is has passed 7-4, it'll go to the Senate Public Safety Committee, and we'll keep a close eye on it. Um, and I think this could be a time to just let everybody know that we're going to do something similar and introduce something similar in the state of Florida. And
Yep.
I think it's really important. It's nice to see California and Oregon and Colorado do these things. Um, but politically and for different reasons, I
Yeah.
think that we need to start opening up, some of the states like Florida, and with Governor DeSantis being a former Navy man, I think a heavily veteran backed first responder bill to create one of these frameworks would work really nicely. No decrim, just a regulated framework to be able to access this medicine to move past your trauma. So let's
You know,
go ahead.
and it's not a couple of things about California before we move on there. So, when we talk about the actual ancillary, the picks and shovel part of this bill, you talked about testing facilities. One of the really interesting things that I took away from our conversation a couple of weeks ago, when you got back, was there's only one testing facility.
In Oregon?
Obviously, yeah, but listen, man, the population there is much smaller than in California.
Yeah.
That's going to be fascinating. You have all these cannabis testing facilities that
Yeah, they'll
kind
flip
of,
into it. They'll flip into it for sure. That's what I'm not going to out the laboratory, but that's what they are. They do asbestos, they do all types of testing. But yeah, absolutely. The framework is there, right?
yeah,
Even some
copy
people that
paste now.
yeah, even some people that we were talking to at Benzinga, right? Like with the dehydrator packs and all these different, like
Yep.
there's picks and shovels and framework to be applied to mushrooms. It's never ever going to be like walking into a dispensary and taking it home. There were a couple people who we know that were in California to urge of microdosing, take home. It's safe. It's unless there's some type of lock enclosure box, and like I just don't think we're there. Obviously, I know, and millions of people microdose, and we know that it's safe. Anecdotally anyway, we know it's effective. We know it's non-abusive, but we're just not there yet, right? Where we are right now is regulated frameworks
Yep.
of states making some money on the back end, of understanding and knowing that this is extremely controlled, where you're doing the ceremony, the set and setting, so the actual facility is extremely controlled, as well as the facilitators understand and know how to prepare, how to sit during, and then how to integrate. Outside of that, right now, I think it's going to take 4 to 5 years to really collect this data in different populations to prove that this is working. And then maybe, just like the decrim stuff, we might be able to add it on. We might be able to add on microdosing, etc.
One of the interesting things that I've seen here, we just talked about the LSD study. LSD wasn't included in here, even though it was granted breakthrough therapy designation. It's a little shocking to me. I mean, you see psilocybin on here, you see MDMA on here. I wonder if it was some of California's colorful history with LSD that kept that off
Yeah,
kept that off this bill.
yeah. I mean, I think I just listen. LSD is interesting because it had a lot of efficacy for addiction. And so one of the things that, and we should, go back to that earlier question about talk therapy, but I think this is going to revolutionize the way that people are treated, that addicts are treated, that whole industry of a revolving door of almost addiction services as a business. And this, if it sits, whether this is going to sit, I think it's most likely going to sit outside of that framework. But it's similar to what we were doing in Illinois, where we were taking people from Symmetria, bringing them to our clinic, treating them with ketamine, and then giving them back to the talk therapist and that whole ecosystem. That is what one of the things that really interests me, not only about California, but also about this whole adult regulated therapeutic framework, right? Is you guys want to be the detox? You want to be the talk therapy arm? Let us actually get to the root cause of these issues, and then we can debrief with you and almost create this kind of harmony of individuals that actually want to get better. That being said, it's big business. So this type of thing, you're really going to have to, and I've already started doing this, you're going to have to find the people that really want to get these individuals better, and they don't want to see them again. And that is going to be hard in of itself. And if we can't find them, then we'll do what me and you always do, right? We'll put our hat on and we'll create it. Exactly.
Yeah. Another point to that is, it's fascinating when you think about AA, right? And, originally a high dose of LSD was kind of the plan before you began your sobriety journey.
Yeah.
And one of the guiding principles there is, the spirituality aspect of that. And most people either see God like Wiz or realize they are a God, after they take a high dose.
Yeah.
I wonder how much that's going to tie in. And then, having discussed, obviously, with somebody you and I were talking to for the read about possibly buying their addiction facilities, they seem so opposed to taking sober people and giving them a drug, but they have no problem, prescribing Suboxone or,
Mm.
any of these other things. It's going to be a fascinating educational journey, I think,
Yeah.
for a lot of these guys.
So I think, I try to stay away. I think people get really weirded out when you start talking about yourself as God. That being said, my beliefs don't really matter here. And I tend to side with Wiz on who we are. We can give life, women can have life. Like, it's pretty clear that we're definitely an image of something, some type of higher power. But the number one thing that these things do is when you come to a facility with depression, with anxiety, these made up indications, they didn't exist, hundreds of years ago. Um, what these medicines can do is make you feel more connected to yourself, because a lot of the medications that we're given numb us out. Opiates, Suboxone, Wellbutrin, Zoloft, benzodiazepine, all of these things that were created in a laboratory help to numb us from the actual feelings or connectiveness to ourselves, people, places, and things. These medicines can help us get back to feeling more connected to ourselves, to others around us, and to like a mission. Now, whether that's your job or whether that's
Your
something,
family, your
yes,
job, yeah.
like something, a friendship, anything. um that's the special sauce of why somebody might go into remission after two treatments of mushrooms over the course of 2 weeks for up to a year. Now, that's a John Hopkins study, right? So go and look at it. Two 25 milligram doses, 2 weeks apart, puts people's remission puts people's depression into remission for up to 1 year. Okay, so, and we could put that link in this.
I think the smoking cessation study was a very similar trial design too, wasn't it?
It
That Johns
was, yeah, and it
Hopkins
was
did?
up to 80% effective at 6 months, at the 6 month mark. So, end of life anxiety, those trials, taking terminally ill cancer patients, they ranked it as one of the top 5 experiences of their life. So, you're talking about, pretty serious things: smoking, addictions, depression, and end of life anxiety with terminally ill cancer patients. You're talking about a cure. So, if it, you know, it's a really hard thing to describe what mushrooms do, but that is in a nutshell why they work so well for a number of indications. And maybe the next time, we hop on here, we'll talk about, um, you know, we have to be really careful to understand that this isn't a panacea. But if people want to put the work in, talk therapy on the front end, see the problem, and then move past it with the talk therapy on the back end, this could work. This is why it works for so many indications, because mushrooms exasperate what's at the forefront of the mind. And if you have that intention, this medicine
This will
has,
this will kickstart it.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it has the
And listen,
technology to do it.
again, we talk about the talk therapy. I think the diet very important. I think
Yeah.
exercising outside is very important. I think that there's a lot of different, hopefully this is a kickstart to a lot of positive changes in your life, not just, take this and you're healed afterwards.
Dude, I'm so glad that you brought that up. Like, you know how what we're developing, right? You talk about picks and shovels, and what the crew is essentially a network of men and women who all share information, right? We don't have an effective way to do that other than posting your runs. Joe, it gets Joe out of it gets all these people
Talked to
seeing
Donnie yesterday.
yeah,
Donnie's
dude.
getting back
Donnie wants
after it.
more. He's like, why do you guys look so healthy? Right. And it's a matter of discipline, right? And the other thing that these mushrooms are able to do, which is I can't explain it, is they help you make better choices, and they help you be very disciplined in the way that you live your life and intentional. So we're working out, it's movement or exercise, whatever. Like, we go pretty hard, but you can just start by walking. Like, my parents are here. My mom's got a double knee replacement. I just get her out of the house, go walk around the block and move and get in the sun. Diet is extremely important. I believe for me anyway, my alcohol intake and my sugar intake, if I'm mismanaging those two things, I'm not at my best.
Yeah.
And then, just some sort of mindfulness practice, whether that's, once every quarter with the mushrooms, or going to church, or my prayer, or my meditation, my visualization, something that I bring in daily to make sure that I'm the best version of myself, so that I'm attracting exactly what I want in my life. So yeah, man, thanks for bringing that up, because it's all well and good to go do, some of these medicines and realize that you need to change. Then it's the execution in your everyday
Put in
life
the
to
work.
really, yeah, to put that change in.
Yeah.
So, and we'll build some programs for that as well, and we'll build a framework for that. And I think it's really important, all these different aspects, to hold people accountable, and then also to have community.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, man. I was talking my brother-in-law last weekend, and having a group of people that you rely on to motivate you to talk through issues, like that sense of community is missing from so many people's lives.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's I sometimes tend to find myself, you know, like when I start getting bad at things, I tend to isolate. I'm
Yep.
very comfortable alone, and I start blocking people out. But like, these are the types of things, like, even when somebody calls me, and I just slide their call, that's a thing I immediately think. I'm like, oh fuck, something's up. What am I doing? Honestly. And I'm like, all
Oh
right,
yeah,
shit,
no,
let's
I
look at my
know.
life. Oh, I'm tired. I just came back from more. It's like all these things, and then, and it started happening within the last 48 hours. But I told you yesterday, it was because I was tired. Like, I was just
Nope.
tired, and I took some time today. I made sure I went to bed early last night. We cut our little day off a little short. I slept in a little bit, not feeling guilty about it at all, and boom, I'm back. Like,
Yep.
I feel
I
like
know everybody
immediately
was so
better.
shocked. Everybody was so shocked at the conference. Like, you guys are going home? You're not gonna stay? It's like, yeah, no, dude, fucking
No,
out
we'll
of here.
prioritize. We've got a lot of things
Yeah.
to do with the REIT, with our families, and we need to
Yeah.
prioritize what's important in our life. And yeah, well, this is good, man. Like, we've been talking about doing this a long time. Let's get this uploaded. We'll get it cut up a little bit, and people can follow along. Maybe we touch on it on Thursday on the webinar. Bring you on. I'm going to give a debrief about the 3-day mushroom retreat, which was amazing. And then you should come on for the last like 5 minutes, and we'll talk about this a little bit more.
Yeah, I love it. Buddy, always a pleasure.
Well, I'll see you on our next meeting here in 5 minutes.
Definitely will. See you, brother.
See you, buddy.